All right, welcome. Today I have James Boettcher, Custodian of Culture and CEO for Fiasco Gelato. Thanks so much for being on the call here today, James.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
So first of all, what is Fiasco Gelato?
Well, Fiasco is a Canadian brand. We exist in Calgary, Alberta, and we make freshly made, handcrafted artisan gelato here every day. We have a joke on the door that says "Gelato fresh today and tomorrow too." The most compelling part, I think, for these kind of conversations is I often refer to us as not a gelato company. So for us, being purpose-driven and really people-centric is really at the core of what we do. We just happen to make gelato. That's really just the vehicle. So
That's awesome. I have a wasp flying around me. I don't know if that's symbolic of anything.
Perfect.
Or it could be a bee. Who knows? Pollinating this conversation of these great ideas. So, James, in your words, you've done a lot of work with Fiasco and had some ebbs and flows and ups and downs and managed to scale the organization. And really, what we're doing on the show is asking leaders such as yourself, what is a conscious brand? So to you, Custodian of Culture, what is a conscious brand?
It's pretty simple from my perspective. I never went to business school or really had an education that put me in a position to understand, we'll say, business as usual. So as the brand started to emerge and decisions come up about ethics and morals and accountability, really I just leaned on what I knew was inherently right, what I refer to as sort of the old school values that I learned living with my grandparents at a young age, and just really leaning in on things that we knew are important to our community and the people that work here. And really, I think that when I identify with what a conscious brand is, it's mostly about being committed to the decisions you make. So knowing that, the decision today really has an effect tomorrow. And so what does that look like?
Right on. So those decisions and that transparency must build a lot of trust. And as the custodian of culture, I'm sure you're cleaning up things and organizing that culture. But I think of the metaphor of a custodian.
Yeah. I think it's easy for companies or even individuals to sort of make claims or statements that their important values are integrity or trust or transparency, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to the actions that revolve around that. So, I get to make a plethora of decisions every day. I use the word get to instead of have to, but I get to make those decisions that ultimately allow us to decide if it's, there's always going to be a fork in the road. So do we choose a way that maybe financially makes more sense or might save us a few bucks or no one will really care? Or do we make the decision that we know when we go to bed at night, we can put our head on the pillow and be confident and feel that we've made the right decision? So we always choose that path. And it's really easy when you've got a company like ours that we've got, what we call committable core values, and they're on the wall, not to, say that we have values or a mission, but more to drive decision making. So it's like a constant reminder of what we stand for and what we believe in. And when we are at a crossroads, we simply just look at those and they help guide our decisions.
Right on. Wow. That sounds like you've put a lot of energy and thought into it.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing, James, with this that I think is curious is, it requires a certain type of leadership or a certain type of leader to run an organization such as Fiasco with these values. So what sort of leadership do you think is required for a conscious brand?
I would say the easiest way to define it is what I like to refer to as servant leadership. So it's the idea that the assembly of people in the organization don't work for me, but we work together, or even to the effect that I feel most days I work for them. So when we're, at a decision in supply chain or even a new customer base, or how we're going to enroll a new organization in our process, like a hop compost or being a living wage leader, not democratically, but more cohesively, the team decides these things and then I just ensure their execution. So they're relying on my leadership to bring forth ideas or purpose that maybe they didn't think was possible, because most people are conditioned in their lives to work for companies where, the bottom line is the most important thing, not the purpose or the people. And so they rely on me to bring these things forward. But ultimately, when we make decisions about what we participate in or what we care about, it's really them that's advocating for it, and I just ensure the execution.
Right on. So that servant leadership, I imagine that you get a lot of ideas. I know Fiasco, and I know the culture of Fiasco, and just the progressive thoughts that your staff and your team have. So I guess I don't want to lead this too much, but what are some of those roadblocks? Because I know that you can't do everything.
Yeah, I would say it's tough for me to adhere or agree to roadblocks that I truly don't believe exist. I grew up kind of being the kid that says, why can't we do this? Not we can't do this. And something as simple as when we were doing our B Corp recertification, I said, this thing called mission lock, where you essentially lock in the values and purpose of the organization into the articles of incorporation. I simply just said, why can't we do this? And so then there's the discussion about, one day, does this render us unsellable? And then I ask myself, do we really want to be sold? And you start going down these paths of okay, this decision will ultimately affect the future. But if we stand for something that's very important to us, I believe it ultimately will lead us right down the right path. So the roadblocks for me that I think occur are really just changing the thought process, or the way that people have thought business, the way they have thought business has operated to date. And that's the biggest obstacle, because there's always going to be, the greatest changes in the world in history have always occurred when people sort of challenge the status quo and say, why can't we do this better?
Yeah, well, that's amazing, because business isn't the tradition that it is. We're no longer, as we see it anyways, our maximized return for shareholders is really looking at all stakeholders and taking them into consideration for all our business decisions, which is a foundation of B Corp. And congratulations on your 111, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for a consulting company like Conscious Brands, that's easy to do. But for someone who has producing a product that has, a supply chain and multiple moving parts all the time, it's really great to see that you're doing something like that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So what advice would you give a new or emerging conscious brand?
I always, I think right now social good is a hot topic, and I really appreciate that businesses, especially new entrepreneurs, are coming at it from this approach of how do we, leave an impact. And I look at, companies like Patagonia, or even, the way that Tom's Shoes really pioneered the 1-for-1 model. My encouragement is that people will now start to discover the authenticity behind why you're doing what you're doing. And I think right now we've seen this uprising of businesses that are doing great social good, but they're not, it doesn't really tie back intrinsically to the people in the organization. So my number one thing I try to advocate for in that space is, find things that are really inherently important to you and your people, and care for them. So for Patagonia, 1% for the planet is obviously a massive part of their business. So it's very authentic when they, blast from the rooftops about what's going on in the United States and protecting the parks. They're not leaning the other way on, we'll say, terminal brain cancer, which might be important and to a lot of people, but it's not fundamentally tied to the business model. And so that's what I think. And I think, if I could throw another nugget on top of it, my advice would be, make sure that you can stand on what you are saying, because I think too often you can, we'll call it social wash things by saying, oh, we really care about this thing. But then it's like, you see the actions of the business when the doors are closed, and that's fundamentally not the way that they're thinking. So, be real and transparent, because now more than ever, there's an accountability that I don't think businesses have seen before.
Absolutely. And, I know the social operating principles, but we've moved past kind of money being that social operating principle into relationship being that social operating principle. So, yes, just being true to what your purpose is, and it might not be the same as Patagonia or Tom's or whoever. It's your individual purpose. So I think that's a great nugget. So thank you for sharing that.
No sweat.
Yeah, and then I guess the last question here is, what actions are you on right now? Like, what's the next step for Fiasco to become more of a conscious brand, or to become even more conscious as a brand? How's that?
Yeah, the 111 achievement was massive. We had a great celebration here, and coincided with my 35th birthday, so we got to have a double party, which was really great. And now it's become a bit more of an ability to teach people about B Corp. So I think that's probably the first part, is where we're really truly taking on the responsibility of being an ambassador of what it means to be a B Corp. I get a call probably every week from a brand that says, do you find value in it? And I said, well, what do you mean? And if they start to lean on dollars and cents or ROI through that, then I say, maybe this isn't the right thing for you. But I think maybe if you dig deep, you can find the purpose that really is attached to B Corp. A few other sort of contextual things are, we've approached our friends at Skyfire Energy, who are a B Corp as well. And we're looking at putting some solar in the building so we can offset some of our power. We use a considerable amount, and it's really tough to cover the whole draw with solar, just based on how gelato equipment and the amperage that's required. But every little bit counts. So we're working super hard on that. And then the harder conversations that probably actually cost us in the long run with some of our restaurant partners, but leaning in a bit more on the living wage conversation. I fundamentally can't understand how anyone can expect someone to work in their business and not give them enough to pay rent and put food on the table. And I think more and more I'm getting impassioned by the prospect of really challenging those around me to do so. So I actually wrote a list of 10 business owners that I know quite intimately, and I'm going to be very insistent that our friendship relies on them taking care of their people. So,
right on. That's awesome. Yeah, I could dive into that quite a bit, and I know for time I probably won't. But the one thing I want to point out, just with the Skyfire example, is it's progress, not perfection, right?
Right.
To cover your whole roof there with solar, it's it might not be financially feasible right now or actually cover everything, but it's those little steps, and it's that journey towards that destination of using business as a force for good.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. James, thank you so much. And we look forward to Fiasco and your leadership continuing to shine in the world of business.
Thanks very much, Rob.
Okay, chat soon.